For mine, Honorable Christopher Marsden. From Morris Heights Health Center, Gideon Dumpling. Yes, okay. Neighborhood Housing Services of Staten Island, Joseph Pierre. Okay. Clevis Fenner. Oh. Okay. Violetta Pina. Villeta. Honorable Roxanne J. Prasad. Honorable Antonio Reynoso, Representative Donovan Swanson here. Honorable Ellen Van Richards. Susie. That's you. Jackie Royal Adams. You. Honorable Althea Stevens. From St. Francis College, Robert Oliva for Tirani Street. Derek Tate. Christopher Toomer. Here. From Sandra Honorable Representative Shane Miller or Sheen Wu. From UJA / Federation of Jewish Philanthropy, NYC, Ariel Zablansky. From United Neighborhood Housing, Nora Moran. United Parcel Service, Janet Lou Bruce.
Lou, I'm present, thank you. Sanmoogan.
Linda Walters. Justin Westbrook Lowry. Honorable Giovanni Williams, Representative Elizabeth Kennedy. Yep. Okay, other than you guys, right? That's all.
Thank you for moving your own form. Unfortunately, we do not have four. We were scheduled that this should be a public hearing, but due to the fact that these technical difficulties as far as streaming this meeting, it doesn't legally qualify as a public hearing. So as such, the public hearing will take place the next time we get this here. However, it's an honor for me to introduce the DYCD and Assistant General Counsel, Adele Bartlett, who will give us a presentation.
Give my Rob in pro rather. I don't mind. You don't have hand sanitizer. I'm not touching it. I talk pretty loud. So what we were going to do today was, in compliance with the new amended open meetings law, we were going to have a public hearing and adopt a resolution that enables us to take advantage of the new aspects of the law, which allow a certain amount under certain circumstances of teleconferencing. Unless we have the hearing and pass a resolution, we cannot take advantage of those exceptions to people being required to be in person. They would give us the right for some people to participate by teleconference if they were facing extraordinary circumstances, if we had quorum otherwise. They would also give us the right to let people who are actually disabled and cannot come to count toward, to participate by teleconference and count toward quorum. But we can't take advantage of any of those things until we pass the resolution. That's just the way the law was written. So we have to get over this hump of having a little public hearing at which the public can listen in and then passing the resolution. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to do that at the next meeting. I don't, pretty straightforward. Any questions?
I was just wondering if the NAVs are able to do like maybe a small, public hearing and then have representatives at our next meeting, which I would assume they should be there anyway, from the NAVs to come.
Well, the law says that we can only adopt a resolution allowing us to take advantage of teleconferencing after a public hearing by this body. So this body is the CAB, and we have to have that hearing.
And how much is left to the quorum? How many people? 23?
23.
23. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to dig a little harder, maybe beat the bushes and, convince people that, especially that one time, in order to take advantage of the teleconferencing provisions, we gotta have one for this person. Again, forgive, like, I'm having no problem.
It's okay. You shouldn't.
Thank you, we'll see what happens next time.
Any other questions? Nothing, yeah, we don't have anything.
Moving on. There's no new board correspondence. We cannot vote to accept the minutes from the CAB meeting from June 22nd. Will have the pleasure of hearing the financial program quarterly report from Ardis. However, we won't be able to vote on it. Ardis, it's great to see you.
Thank you.
Good evening, all. And like the chair, yes, I probably do need the mic. I don't speak as loudly as. Thank you. Oh,
So you're on.
and now I need the,
Oh, you need that up.
yeah,
David,
sorry.
I thought you were putting.
He did put it up, but I don't know
Sure,
what I
three.
did.
Yeah, it's like this.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to also, endorse what the chair said. Thank you so much for being here. DYCD really appreciates it, especially on such a hot day. Thank you. My name is Ardis Sanmoogan. I'm the Senior Director in the Fiscal Unit at DYCD, with responsibility for CSBG programs, among others. And I'm gonna make a presentation on City Fiscal Year 24, which started on July 1st, but also to tell you a little bit of how we closed City Fiscal Year 23, which ended on June 30th. Yes. Okay. For City Fiscal Year 24, overall, we have a budget of $35.2 million. And these funds are allocated among 3 areas: program contracts, which currently represents 78% of the budget; other contractual services, which is coming in at 8%; and personal services coming in at 14%. The program contracts, which is our largest block of funding, covers a number of different direct services that DYCD funds on behalf of our CBOs. The biggest is the Neighborhood Development Group, which has a budget of $15.3 million. And the Neighborhood Development Group has 7 or 8 sub-programs, which focuses on youth, seniors, healthy families, a couple of immigration assistance programs, a couple of adult literacy programs. And the two new programs, economic development and safety and crime prevention. And as I said before, that's coming at $15.3 million. Services for Indian families has a budget of just under $600,000. What used to be HRA legal services contracts are now just immigration legal services because it's now back in DYCD. And the team headed by Mike will be managing those internally now, as we used to since city fiscal year 2015. But it's back now at DYCD. And that has a budget of $2.1 million. The NYCALI program has grown significantly with CSBG funding. Overall, it hasn't grown, but there's been a swap in funding, meaning we reduced the city tax levy component, which used to be about $2.4 million. And the CSBG portion, which used to be just over $500,000, is now coming in at $2.3 million. The reason we did that is the city, as folks may know, is going through some financial difficulties, and New York City has to balance its budget. Some cities and states and municipalities can close their city fiscal year with more spending than revenue because they can borrow funds to cover that. But if any of you remember 1977, I was not here, but I was born, when the city was in crisis, one of the laws that were passed was that New York City have to have a balanced budget, meaning our expenses must match our revenue. So if the city, when it's planning its out-year budget, notice that there's a deficit in the out years, the mayor and his budget team, the Office of Management and Budgets, reach out to their agencies and says, hey, you need to cut your budget by X amount. One of the things that DYCD did to meet that, what we call PEG, or Program to Eliminate the Gap, was to, because our CSBG budget has been growing slowly over the past few years, we were able to utilize more CSBG funds and reduce our CTL spending in this particular program. So that's one of the reasons we went from $500,000 for the NYCALI program to $2.3 million. The next program is the Fatherhood Initiative, coming in at $2.8 million. Adolescent literacy, just under $850,000. And the Summer Youth Employment Program, which is at $3.5 million. Altogether, we have a budget of program contracts of $27.5 million. Since this is September, and we ran this report on August 29th, we only have data for July and August. Our spending data is only July and August. And you might think that that's very low, $94.7 thousand. But this is very common. At this point in time, CBOs are getting they're setting up. They are not really in a position to submit invoices to DYCD as yet. But if you look at the amount of money we have paid out, it's significantly more than our expenses. So we have expenses of $94.7 million, but we have paid $2.1 million. And the reason for that is to help CBOs get up and running at the start of the city fiscal year, we give CBOs who ask for it an advance of 25% of their budget. So between now and December, when we do these reports, you'll notice that our payments are much higher than our expenses. And that's because we have given the providers an advance, and when they submit their invoices from July to December, we pay 100% of those invoices. But come January, when they submit their invoice, at that point, we start to recoup the advance. So if a provider submits an invoice for $10,000 in July, we pay them $10,000. If a provider submits the same $10,000 in January, we'll pay them less than $10,000 because we start to recoup the advance. So you'll know, so don't be alarmed that we have paid out more than we've spent. Overall, the program contracts have a spending rate of nearly 0%, but we've paid out about 8% of that. And that's across 122 contracts. Other contractual services, this is the bucket of funds that support our direct services. And the bulk of that is in our technical assistance category, coming in at $1.2 million, which represents 45% of that category. Oh, sure. Yes, absolutely. Does that work? Sorry about that. Yes, the biggest bucket is technical assistance. The next bucket It's one category that's called AOTPS or admin services. The only reason it's called AOTPS at this point is that we have not come up with a plan exactly how we intend to spend that. Once we have a line item budget for that, we'll have the names of those items in the report. We have stipends coming in at $50,000 and central insurance program at $65,000. And the other contractual services rounds out at $2.7 million, of which we spent $56,000, which represents 2% of that budget. Finally, we have the DYCD personal services budget coming in at $5.1 million. And even though we are paid on a biweekly basis, we do a cost allocation on a quarterly basis. So we don't actually see the PS expenses, PS personal services. We wouldn't see that until we have our November meeting. So that's when we'll see the first spending for that. So that is the FY24 budget at this point in time. We have our allocations, but we don't have much spending to go along with it, which is very similar for this time of year. It's nothing to be alarmed about. I'm now going to talk about how we close city fiscal year 23.
Is it possible to jump to?
Absolutely, absolutely, please.
So quick question, and this is if there's any pattern there. So you said about 122 contracts have been awarded in advance thus far?
No, I said we've awarded $122,000, but we haven't necessarily given advance to all of those providers because not all of them requested.
Right, and that's what I was trying to get at. If there's a pattern in maybe of the different programs offers where we're seeing a need for advance and maybe integration services or other program contracts, that might be something.
That's a great question, and I actually don't have the answer to that, but we can look into the details and find that answer for you.
Because I just think if they're requesting, and if this is happening at the fiscal year,
Yes.
what support are we providing prior to that? Obviously, they need the money regardless, but
Yeah.
how can we try to solve that?
So they know that they can reach out to us and ask for an advance. They definitely know that when we send them our contract documents, that information is relayed. But so just so I don't understand your question, is your question, is there a pattern that we see one program area versus the next?
Yeah.
Of how many contracts request advances and how many do not?
Yeah.
Okay, I will get that answer.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I wanted to address the CBO. How does the CBO, I know I'm on a couple of different CBOs. How do they request money from DYCD to help? Because, you know, a lot of them are struggling for the funds. So how does that work?
So do you mean the CBOs who we have already contracted with, or CBOs who we may not have contracted with, but
I don't know if they're contracted. I think
Okay.
because I believe they don't know anything about it.
okay. All right, so I can ask my colleague Mike to help to answer some of that question. But generally, when DYCD has a program that we're looking for CBOs to provide on DYCD's behalf, we put out something called a request for proposal.
Right.
So within DYCD, we would come up with a concept paper. We would hash it out with a lot of different units within DYCD. And then once we're ready, we say to OMB, our oversight agency, Office for Management Budget, this is what we want to do, and this is what's going to cost. And we have a lot of back and forth with OMB. No, don't spend this much. Yes, we want to spend that much. There's a lot of back and forth. But once we put out a request for proposal, there's a lot of public notices around the city. It's describing what the program we're looking for CBOs to provide on our behalf, and where they can go and access the proposal and apply for that. I don't know if you want to add any more, Mike.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just need to get the information on how to apply, so I can bring it back to people that I know, and they have to be 501c3,
Yes.
or can they also be under the umbrella of 501c3?
They have to be 501c3. So if you know entities that want to do business with the city, let me back up. Consistent with what Ardis just said, when DYCD, like other human service agencies, is going to try to procure services, first we'll put out a concept paper that's an open, transparent process. People can give feedback to that. Then, as you said, there'll be the request for proposals. And at this point in time, and you should advise, and other CAB members, you should advise folks in your larger network, to visit, Passport, or Google Passport, or deal with the box.
Yes,
The mayor's office of contract services for the city of New York has an online portal called Passport. And so 501c3 entities should register through that website, should declare themselves as an online document vault where you would give your capabilities. And then once you have confirmed the categories under which you as an entity can deliver human services, you would see all of the relevant proposals. So if you do education, anything that DYCD or any other agency is doing, or if you do case management, I'll give you an example for case management. You might see things that Administrators for Children's Services or the Health Department, just like DYCD, are procuring. And then in the portal, you'll be able to determine what you want to apply for. And that's part of why Passport was created, to try to make it fair, to try to make it more transparent, and also to try to make it easier. So the application process has been streamlined. So you don't have to write a huge book for every single thing that you're applying for. And because you have your online documents there, your capabilities, some of the central stuff is known. And that's how we work. So it's actually not a part of my presentation today, but 2 meetings ago, we gave an update in terms of the last status of the request for proposals. And now, since I'm going to go up a little bit later, I'll add something I wasn't planning on adding in the record. All right, does that answer your question? All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Any other questions on the 2024 or anything else? Okay, so we'll talk about how we close the city fiscal year 2023. And we're going to compare it to the data that was presented at the June 22nd meeting. For 2023, we had a budget of $40.5 million. And as of June 22nd, we had spent $25.4 million. The bulk of that in the largest area program contracts at $20.7 million. We are in the midst of closing the city fiscal year. In fact, tomorrow, everything has to be tied up and done. The expense numbers we have to close the city fiscal year at this point in time, when I say expense, I mean year-to-date expenditures, meaning expenses we've received from our CBOs, is just about under $26 million. However, we expect to close the year at, for the program contracts, which has a budget of $33.1 million, we expect to close the year at $31.8 million. So that represents 97% of our spending. So again, I want to point out that even though our spending early in the year looks really low, it ramps up towards the end of the year. In fact, it really ramps up starting January and to the end of the year. And we are setting aside an additional $2 million because we know that CBOs will continue to submit invoices after we close the year tomorrow. Finally, we have program contracts had a budget of $2.2 million. We've spent $947,000, and that's all we'll spend in that area. Personal services had a budget of $5.2 million, and we've spent $5.2 million. So overall, the $40.5 million budget, we have expenses for $5.8 million, but we'll have an additional $2 million of expenses. So that's par for the core with CSBG spending at DYCD. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have. Thank you, Susie. You set me up.
Great. As always, a really good question. What happens to the amount of the balance other than the $2 million that we set aside? What happens to the balance? We roll it over to the next.
This woman knows her budget, obviously. It's tricky because the city CSBG is awarded on a federal fiscal year basis, right? So from October through September is when we receive the term in which we can spend the funds. The city fiscal year is July through June. We don't roll the city fiscal year on the spending. We roll the federal fiscal year on the spending. So come January, we have to submit the final claim for each city fiscal year. And at that point in time is when we do a swap. We don't physically do a roll, although it could be termed a roll. So we usually don't want to submit our final claim to the state with a high rollover, right? We've figured out that the state is comfortable with a $2 million rollover. But as I said before, spending really ramps up in January, right? So come January, we usually we have more than $2 million of unspent funds at that point in time, but we know it's gonna ramp up. So we do, I don't wanna call it creative accounting, but in some ways it is. We have one program, the SYP program, which is perfect for CSBG because it happens in the first 3 months of the city fiscal year. It happens from July through September, right? And the federal fiscal year ends in September. So we can do a swap with city tax levy and CSBG dollars during that time to increase our CSBG expenses and reduce city tax levy expenses. So that's what we do. So you'll notice that as of now, the SYP budget is $3.5 million. Come the January meeting, this number is probably going to jump to about $10 million because we're doing a swap. So that's how it's not a traditional roll, but because the fiscal years do not line up, and because SYP is a perfect program in order to do this. You're welcome. Any other questions before I say goodnight? Well, thank you so much for your patience and your questions. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Ardis, as always. Excellent presentation. We appreciate the clear, concise answers you give to the board on the question. Because we have great honor to introduce, in a way an individual does not need an introduction, and that is Deputy Commissioner of Community Development, Mike Bobbitt. It's great to see you in person. It's great to see everybody in person.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you and good evening. Thank you to the members, as has been said before, who've come in person and to anyone who's logged on today. And I'll adjust my remarks briefly in light of the prior discussion, but I have a couple of things that I wanted to say. Actually, I'll say that first. So this is out of turn now, but later this fall, there will be a request for proposals related to the agency's literacy programming. And so if you recall, some months ago, we did release a concept paper for that. As that was held for open comment, we reflected on that feedback, and the RFP itself will be forthcoming. So as we track that when it actually comes out, and when that period closes, I'll be able to include updates so that you and the other board members can see sort of in real time how we go about doing those things. I want to talk briefly about the continuing resolution. So if you're following what's happening in Washington, D.C., you realize there are 11 working days before the federal fiscal year ends. And there are concerns about a federal government shutdown, as this possibly has been raised last month. The National Community Action Foundation, that is the head lobbyist for the reauthorization of CSBG funding. So there are concerns that might happen. However, we will monitor the situation for the possibility that there will be a short-term continuing resolution that will be passed. And members of this body have seen, I've reported prior times, that often is what has happened. So while we do hope ideally there will be a straight reauthorization of CSBG, if they do a continuing resolution, we continue to spend the money, we continue to do the right thing with admittedly old funding formulae, but we'll keep going as long as nobody stops us. Open meeting law, I think I can skip because we had the presentation by Adele, but I would use this as an opportunity to encourage all the board members, encourage your peers to come in person. And we very much look forward to, at our next meeting, making sure that we do have a quorum. I noted earlier, we got minutes are stacking up. So we want to get minutes approved. We want you to be able to conduct your business. The tracks, the triennial review for accountability and compliance with standards. I've reported about this in prior meetings, and I want to let the board know that the New York State Department of State will conduct the next triennial review of DYCD from between September 12th and 14th. That'll be at 123 William Street, where our administrative offices are, fiscal offices are, my division's offices are, et cetera. It's actually right downstairs from the Department of State's New York City office. And as board members may be familiar, this includes a review of DYCD's programmatic and administrative functions. It's conducted by the state's program and fiscal staff. It includes an extensive file review covering the 9 categories, the 50 national organizational standards to which every community action agency must be held. And because it's their larger triennial review, there's also 147 indicators of excellence. So our team, CD, has been working closely and cooperatively with Ardis and Chris Lewis and the folks in fiscal, Bill Kamen and Chris Lay, the folks in compliance, and really all the other divisions to prepare these extensive files for the Department of State's review. The tracks also includes a review of the internal controls and a sample of 18 CSBG funded contracts with DYCD. And so again, I'm thankful to fiscal and the audit team who reached out to the CBOs to deliver services to explain. Some may be familiar, some not, what this process is. And because they are the recipient of CSBG, they are obligated to comply and demonstrate what their internal controls are to Department of State's satisfaction. So this happens every 3 years. I think members of this board know that we've actually done pretty well over the years. This is a period of transition, so we'll see, but I anticipate that, in the main we'll do very well when we actually know. Of course, I'll report concretely about that. I want to start including periodic updates about community development and public safety. So some of the matters will not be specific to CSBG, but will include CSBG and the larger picture. As this group knows, starting in February, the Office of Neighborhood Safety, which was previously part of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, was transitioned into DYCD. And the Community Development Division, like all divisions of the agency, has begun a process of reorganization and restructuring to embrace that. So you may hear me at points in time talking about not just community development, but community development and public safety. So to that end, the division continues to attend the New York Police Department's ceasefire call-ins in the boroughs. And so for folks who are unfamiliar with ceasefire is a coordinated process through which the NYPD reaches out to the district attorney's office and other law enforcement individuals, where they target individuals who are already known to the police and law enforcement at risk for having committed crimes and offer them an opportunity to access resources. And if they don't access resources, their next length of stay in corrections might be lengthy. So we're trying to do our part as part of this larger constellation of programs and opportunities to make sure that CD programming is available. So when these meetings happen, and I was tempted to characterize the meetings, I'm not going to do that. So when these meetings happen, there are services providers who have authentic, helpful intentions that are on the site. Like, look, we are here for you. We're already in the community. We're available to assist you. So it's an important part of our larger landscape that we do that, even though we don't fund that. At the same time, we recently delivered a presentation to the crisis management services, which are the agencies that are funded to do cure violence. That's the work that we now do oversee. And we had a targeted presentation with the steering committee to review all of the community development programming. So that includes the CSBG portfolio, as well as other things under community development, our discretionary portfolio, all of our literacy and immigrant services work, and a review, obviously, of the Community Action Board, the Neighborhood Advisory Board. We have a follow-up meeting, which we're looking to schedule a date, but sometime in early October, in the interest of cure violence providers knowing when they're doing their interventions, both for the individuals for whom they do their interventions and for the family members around those individuals, there's a wealth of services that are already available in their neighborhood because it's what we fund. So as we have updates on that front, I'll let you know. The division is planning for the launch of a newsletter that is focused on community development. So that will again include CSBG, but also the breadth of what we do. And we anticipate each issue will highlight CD-led events and provide a spotlight on programs operated on CD, including under the CSBG portfolio, as well as include success stories from program participants served by CSBG and profiles of the NAB members themselves who volunteer and work with DYCD. So I mention this now because we'd like to invite CAB members who are willing to be interviewed for possible features to the newsletter to identify yourselves to NABLA by the end of the meeting so that they can assign to schedule those. We want to make sure that we have a steady stream of content, and we think people who leverage their time and volunteer with DYC, we want to raise you up and raise your efforts up. One of my favorite subjects, dads take a child to school day. This year's Dad's Take Your Child to School Day will be September 21st. And DYC's signature event will be held 6:30 to 8 a.m. in East New York. The Pink Houses Cornerstone will host a kickoff where we anticipate about 100 dads and their children will receive a welcome address before walking to the Brooklyn Scholars Charter School, which houses both Compass and Sonic programs operated by Good Shepherd and serves grades K through 8. The commissioner will be there. We anticipate that the mayor is going to be there as well, so we think we'll have some favorable press coverage under this administration. There's been a longstanding tradition that we've grown over time, and we're looking forward to our mayor, our commissioner being able to put their stamp on that. If you are interested or know others that are interested in Dad's Take Your Child to School, this is celebrated citywide, celebrated statewide. It has become known as an offshoot of the Million Fathers March. Not well, yeah, it is the Million Fathers March. Was what's the Chicago? I'll get it to you later on. Anyway, some of the inception of this came from a Chicago program, but New York's profile has risen so much that a lot of the nation actually take their marching orders and learn from our campaign. That has happened over time. Anyway, if you know others that want to be part of this campaign, again, see NABLU, and we'll have members of the community development team follow up with them. We're happy to help handhold and turnkey folks. One of the recent examples of that is, if you're familiar with the Department of Education's Pivot Schools, that's about 250 schools. And one of Pivot Schools' missions is to look to amplify public safety. So they have recently latched onto the idea, which we certainly support, that Dad's Take Your Child to School can include encouraging fathers and father figures to donate their time in the interest of serving as hall monitors, keep the building safe, keep the premises safe. So that's a plank of what they want to amplify. So we're anticipating that somewhere among those 250 conversations that are going to be held around the city around the same time, we'll have some spillover benefits, which certainly fits our mission, certainly fits how we are looking to support Office of Neighborhood Safety, do a lot of proactive work. So we will be happy to help enlist and enroll your schools as well. I want to talk briefly about digital equity. I may have mentioned this before, but I want to let you know we continue to work with New York State Empire State Development and their Connect All office. And the Connect All office is focusing on improving the digital inequity gap. And to that end, DYCD has joined the city's Office of Technology to raise awareness of Connect All's listening sessions to gather data about digital inequity and what we can do to bridge the gap. And so New York State Empire State Development is doing that in the interest of helping raise federally to federal labor, but also to federal telecommunications, part of Governor Hochul's plan, which is a $1.2 billion plan to try to improve digital equity. We want to make sure New York City's feedback is an important part of that. So we have been amplifying throughout our provider network and also doing some targeted emails to program participants, the ease of being able to give their feedback. And we have been helping promote digital listening sessions and also some in-person listening sessions. So stay tuned, and I'll have the staff follow up with you when we concretize a date, but I expect in early November we'll host or co-host one of those sessions here in this room. Remote work pilot. So you may have been seeing the news, and you know that between City Hall and the DC 37 union, the DYCD now has permission to move forward with a remote work pilot for eligible DC 37 members. So after careful planning, the remote work pilot started just this week. And in general, those staff who have signed up to participate are, and their work allows them to do so, can work remotely for up to 2 days a week. There are special considerations though. If we have a major activation in the community, you can't do that work virtually, you have to be in the community. So it depends on the circumstances of a given week. So it's early going, first week, but I would like to say, I think that the last administration, we've learned some successes of being able to work in a hybrid fashion. So we will monitor this. We will say how it goes. And certainly the city and the administration will be responsive as other unions, should they wish to participate in a similar pilot down the road. Finally, this team, the NEB-CAB Liaison Unit, CD, specifically NABLU unit, is planning meet and greet meetings for all of our NDAs to be held later this fall. And these will kick off actually probably at the end of this month. These meetings are to give presentations and reports about CSBG and other DYC programs and services within each NDA. And so credit to Anita and her staff working with DYCD Strategic Partnership Unit to strategize the implementation of these meetings. And one thing I want to say about it is we've probably talked about this in prior years. We're connected to a community needs assessment, maybe an NDA RFP. and connected to an NDA RFP would be a meet and greet. So there'd be an opportunity for the NAB members who participate in the needs assessment, who participate in reading the proposals along with DYCD, to meet the staff who are now assigned to carry out the awards, the needs for which were determined through the community needs assessment. So that's sort of the bones of the structure of why we've done these meet and greets. And so I look at that as necessary but not sufficient given our current circumstances. So why Anita and our team are working on strategic partnership is, while we will, as we would always do, invite the NDA programs to attend these meetings, we want to invite all of DYC's investments to attend these meetings too. We want to increase the networking, the cooperative spirit that's going on. And I keep looking at Grace. I'm going to give this example. When we finally got out from the pandemic and did the NAB member convening, the way that went, we had intended to do this in June of 2020, but there's no way we're going to meet in person in June of 2020. When we finally did the NAB convening, I thought that was a really robust interchange. We delivered information to our NAB members. They delivered information to us. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about that, two things I enjoyed about the meeting. One is not just that the commissioner came, but they stayed as long as he did. And he fielded so many questions from NAB members on a range of topics that historically we might not have made space for in these meetings. So that was an early example of what meet and greets can be. So we still have the bones of our structure, but we're actually building muscle to put on the bone. So if we have some Compass, if we have some Sonic, if we have some runaway homeless youth, et cetera, that want to talk about their issues and how to cross-refer to our NDA programs, all the better. So credit again to Anita and her team, and I'll give a shout out to Strategic Partnerships for working towards where we need to go and why essentially we're doing these things that we're doing. I also credit the staff. They've been very active in visiting the office of elected public officials who have seats on the NABs. In the last couple of weeks alone, they have connected with 8 different EPO offices, including many of the council members, members of the state Senate, Assembly, and the congressional district. And they will continue those efforts throughout the year. And I want to acknowledge them. And I know that it's not easy work. And I will also invite you, if within your network, there are EPOs and their offices and staff, just in the way that we encourage CAB members to attend and the importance of a quorum. If there's folks in your network where you want to join us in sort of trumpeting the importance of making time for this, please join us in doing that. It's sort of an all hands on deck. And I know folks are always busy. And we did the roll call. I know there were a lot of excused absences, but if there's anybody in the bubble that we can kind of give a nudge to recognize the importance, you've made time to be here. We want others to make time to be here and to participate fully. On August 28th, CD staff attended a hiring hall. And if you have been watching this administration, for certain administrative titles for which there's no competitive exam, they're really pushing and encouraging all the agencies to attend these hiring halls. The city is doing central promotion to make sure people know that there are opportunities to get hired by the city of New York. You know, during the pandemic, we've had retention issues and hiring issues. So this administration has made hiring halls available as a tool. And we're really encouraged to bring staff to the hiring halls, to take them seriously, which we do, which of course we would take seriously. We do take seriously. And I have to let you know, anecdotally, we've been picking people up out of the hiring halls, including within CD. So our compliance specialist was identified through one of the hiring halls. And so Anita, what do you have, 3, 4 candidates you're reviewing this week? Something like that. 5 can't see, this is for August 28th. The posting had been out for a little while, but because staff went to that thing, there's 5 people. So in terms of, I mentioned it because of Stuart's position. So Stuart had a great term of service as part of the team. He moved on to other things. We wish him well, but we do look forward to being able to replace his capacity soon. And I'll give credit to the administration. The hiring halls are really working out in that regard. Lily's not in the room right now, but she's online. Lily Dasgupta has returned to work this week. Welcome back, Lily. Let's clap it up for Lily, right? Her return, right? And now I don't remember, it was a 3 months, 4 months? 3 months. All right. So we welcome her back. I was teasing her today because I remember what that was like when I first went back to work after paternity leave. So I'm teasing her a little bit, but we got to do what we got to do as working parents, right? So welcome back. And I'll wrap by thanking Mitch Noel. Mitch is moving on to the discretionary unit. So I'm not losing Mitch. Mitch is still part of CD. We're just, shifting people to new roles and new opportunities for them. And the unit will be, NABLU will be welcoming Reginald Gibson and joining NABLO. So we'll probably have Mitch at the, we'll probably have Reggie at the next meeting as well. Reggie has a wealth of DYCD experience, so it's sort of nice that Mitch can bring things that he's done for the unit to a different part of the division, and Reggie can bring things that he's brought from a different part of the division to this very unit. And so with that, I close the commissioner's report. Were there any questions? Yes, please. I thought we all had to move for a second, or yeah. That's a good question. So let me unpack that a little bit. I think you're referencing ceasefire, right? Okay, so there is already a wide array of programs that DYCD, as well as the city of New York, are trying to offer to, let's say, adolescents, so persons between the ages of 16 and 24. Let's just start there, right? So within DYCD, there's the entire youth workforce division. And we often do presentations, for instance, about the Summer Youth Employment Program. I think we have also presented about Work, Learn, and Grow, which is a smaller but a year-round program. And we can continue to invite them back to do other presentations. One thing that I will point to, and it might make sense to bring them back to discuss this, is as part of the onboarding and the integration that I mentioned of the Office of Neighborhood Safety, there's a 50-odd million, I think it's $54 million program called Precision Employment. And so that was a program, well, that is a program that was operated and now is being overseen by DYCD that is looking to increase the opportunities and shift the trajectory for criminal justice involved persons in the workforce. So for instance, green jobs, like jobs that are like practical and attainable and could lead to sustainable careers. So that's a program that's directly within DYC's oversight, and it's part of this larger network or array of programs to try to get at this public safety equation. So precision is one thing. And then there's, as I said, an array of existing DYC programs. That's another thing. I mentioned ceasefire specifically. It's not a programmatic intervention that DYC oversees. It's a different model. And I'll draw this distinction, and hopefully I'll do it justice this way. In the city of New York, there's ceasefire and there's also cure violence. And so I have presented about what we call crisis management systems. There's a network of providers that are contracted by DYCD. Those contracts moved from the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice to DYCD to do a range of interventions under a rubric that violence is a public health issue. And because violence is a public health issue, we need a public health approach to addressing that issue. So we can unpack at a later time more details about the cure violence model and day-to-day, like when I talk about the restructuring in the main, and I mentioned the steering committee meeting we had recently, we met with the steering committee and the providers who are operating that model, of which we ultimately do have oversight, to try to increase their connection and understanding of these other CD programs so we can try to increase referrals. Now, separate and apart from the cure violence model, which again is seeing violence as a public health issue that needs a public health response, ceasefire in the city of New York anyway is organized by the police department that sees violence as a law enforcement problem needing a law enforcement response. So under the ceasefire model, at least in New York, the police department is coordinating with the district attorney's offices to identify persons with known histories of violence. This is not necessarily first-time offenders. These are people that the district attorney's offices may know very well, possibly because of patterns of violence and other criminal behavior. And so they are at liberty at the moment. They may be under probation supervision at the moment. And so when the police department calls them, and I've been to a couple of these before, so I didn't want to categorize or editorials about the experience, but I'll just share an anecdote. Like, so one of the ones I went to, as I arrived, there was a very significant police presence. There's like sirens and lights, and there's like a lot of police cars outside before you even go inside. And then when you go in, well, it's funny what happens when you go inside. But the one I went to when we went inside was being held at a house of worship. And so some of the faith-based leaders spoke to the mostly men. There were women there, but it was mostly men. So spoke to the participants, essentially saying, look, you may not have wanted to be here, but there's a reason why you're all here. You're all here because, like, if you make another misstep, these folks are at the sides of the room. They know exactly where to find you. They know where to find your associates or whatever. But what we'd like to do is focus on giving everyone one more chance. And so what those faith-based leaders did and what other folks did is like, here's my card, here's my card, here's my card. If you get into anything right now, I want you to call me. I'm going to put you at the top of my list. And then in connection with that part of the meeting, I don't want to say that it was scared straight, but if you ever watch TV, it's a little bit more like that than what the Cure Violence folks do. And so then if that's being held at one part of the room, and another part of the room, tables of providers. And so we believe it's our charge to make sure that we're letting our providers know, hey, ceasefire meeting is next week in this part of Staten Island, and then this part of Brooklyn, or like, those are your clients too. You gotta go see your potential clients. And then they know there are folks that are outside of law enforcement that are ready to serve them, that want to serve them, should they wish to step forward and receive services. It's not different than the offer we would make of the Cure Violence thing. I think the difference is the modality. Cure Violence folks, as I've observed, don't tend to go to the ceasefire meetings because they're not trying to ruin their reputation of being authentic and in the neighborhood with shared lived experiences. So again, to me and to my team, it feels incumbent, like, we are neutral. We are supporting the services provider. So if the police says, here's a meeting, you can give resource, we'll go there. If Cure Violence says we're going to be in such and such park, and if you want to preserve, we'll go there. We'll go where our clients will be. And that's how we approach it. For at the Pink Houses, yes, that's would be the Day I Sacred Child School signature event.
You don't see any of that going on in Staten Island. It is going on a lot in Brooklyn, and starting under Thompson, but the guy picked it up and keeps it on everybody's car and it's doing different things. But I don't see any of that in Staten Island. Okay, my last question is.
Can I respond to that before you move on to your last question? So can you just sidebar, let's have email tomorrow. So I want to assign someone from my team. So whoever you know that has an appetite to try to pick this back up, there's not a lot of planning time in the next couple of weeks or whatever, but we can try both in Brooklyn and in Staten Island. And I do know in prior years, we have had events in parts of Staten Island that have been very well attended. Like UAU springs to mind. I think of the Gerard Carter Center. They had a major sort of like the march, like I'm talking about in East New York. So I think it would be possible to sort of reignite some of those conversations. Yeah, we'll give something to the staff that they can email to all of the CAP. Thank you for that. Sure.
In the Bronx too. Throwing it out there, we need that in the Bronx too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know anecdotally such programs happen. I think it's partly trying to help encourage that there's more and more. And some of the very helpful allies along the way have been individual parent coordinators. Some of the community education councils have latched on to it. And I forget where in the Bronx, but I think there's one or two in the Bronx that have done that and try to push it out to multiple schools. So,
I never heard of it, so.
all right, well, let's try to build it up.
Well, again, really just echoing specifically what I'm saying from the Borough President's Office, we want to make sure we're also invited, and that's right around the corner from where I grew up, so I definitely want to get excited.
You got it.
And then also for the meet and greet, because you know, invited specifically for us, and we have what we're supposed to have on every NAB, that's also a good opportunity for us to get local looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we would very much like to do that. We'd like the respective borough president's offices, but really members, wherever you sit, the territories that are relevant to you, you're formally invited to attend these. Were there other questions? All right, with that, I give the mic back. Thank you again.
Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate your report. The executive committee met on August 24th. The meeting began at 6:16 p.m. We reviewed and approved tonight's agenda. We reviewed the committee reports. There was no old or new business discussed, and the meeting was adjourned at 6:38 p.m. Because me now, before I give the mic over to the new governance committee chairperson, I want to congratulate the members of the executive board who took new positions and have done outstanding work in their old positions. And now as they move it into their new positions, I'm sure they will continue to shine and help the CAB and DYCD in an incredible way that they have done till now. So I will now turn it over to the first vice chair, Greg Hambrick, to give his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone in person. Before I start, as I shift from program committee chair to governance committee chair, I want to recognize and honor the outgoing chair of the governance committee, Member Walters, myself, and other members of this executive committee.
Yay,
Thank you
Linda.
for working. So, you deserve that. Now, it's a small body here. I wish it was a lot more people, but we had the pleasure of working with Linda for many, many years. She is a wonderful public servant and has been a pleasure to work with these last few years before this executive committee. So, Linda, on behalf of the entire CAB, thank you for your years of service and commitment. We got used to you, we're gonna miss you, but you've done a great job and we're on you today.
Yay, Linda.
So the governance meeting we had on Wednesday, the 23rd. Obviously the biggest topic of conversation was the Open Meetings Act now being back in effect. So I won't rehash a lot of what's been discussed. The attorney for DYCD Adele Bartlett opened up with a lot of very important information as it relates to the Open Meetings Act being reenacted. I know she will be present here next week to answer a lot of questions that go into detail from the legal aspect of the Open Meetings Law. I will just add that it is a state law, it is not a DYCD law. So this applies to any meetings that will be held publicly. We all know that for this first 2 years of the pandemic, we held these meetings totally virtual.
Yeah.
And then close for the last year, it's been hybrid, and now the state has moved to make sure that we hold these meetings now in person. So certainly next meeting, we'll hopefully have forum to be able to pass these very important updates to that particular law. And again, thank you for all that came in person to this particular meeting. CAB vacancies, public sector, we are still looking for a representative for the Staten Island Board President. I know that the UN staff and the DYCD are working feverishly to make that happen. I believe there's some traction there. So hopefully we have some positive updates to report as it relates to that. And for the low income sector, there are still 5 vacancies, and again, the DYCD staff have been voting on to make sure those vacancies are filled, so we can get into capacity. CAB attendance, there were 2 absences as of the June 22nd meeting of this year. Absences are counted from September. So essentially, everyone has a clean slate starting from this meeting down in terms of absences. So we're all starting on the same slate as it regards to that. There wasn't any old business, the new business. We really the team congratulate you as newly elected first vice chair of this committee. And happy to serve with Jan on this committee. Rita has someone I've been on CAB, I did the math, but I'm private sector member for 16 years.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
really.
Hey.
So, and the meeting was confirmed at 6:37. Of course, we can't move them in, any question, before I pass the mic to the chair. No, I don't think it is on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Greg, for your report. I will now ask Anita to be so kind and then program the report as the chairperson of that committee is to.
Yeah, she's out of town also.
What the mic computer?
No, I think I'll just yell from here and then our people who are online can hear me better. Okay, so the program committee met on Wednesday, August 16th. And the minutes were in the board packet that was sent to all board members. The presentation was on adult literacy, and Ms. Rivka Berman, Program Director for Adult Literacy, and her staff, Tova Chazanoff, Rosenfield, and Paola Ramirez, were all present to talk about vocational services at the Jewish Community Council of Greater Coney Island, also known as GCI. Rivka Berman started the presentation by introducing the staff members and said that she herself had been with the organization for over 25 years, directing vocational programs, and currently she directs the adult literacy program. The program provides English as a second language to classes throughout New York City to help mostly immigrant adults develop English skills that enable them to reach significant personal goals such as employment, obtaining citizenship, healthcare, confidence to participate in their communities and advocate for their children. The instruction is not a one-size-fits-all model as the participants come to learn English for different reasons. Although the organization's administrative office is in Coney Island, it has formed strong partnerships and bonds with schools and over 50 community-based organizations in low-income neighborhoods throughout the 5 boroughs. The organization receives both city and state funding to provide the English classes. Classes are all diverse and as participants speak many different languages. However, most of the participants just want a better life for their families and make the effort to attend class even after a long day of work. Ms. Berman listed some statistics of the fiscal year 2022. And as I said, it's in the minutes in your packet. But new this year, earlier, the organization was awarded funding to provide English classes at the Humanitarian Emergency Response and Relief Centers, or HERC centers, it's called with the acronym, to provide services for the newly arrived asylum seekers. The HERC centers are in hotels converted to shelters to house the asylum seekers. Louder? You can't hear it? Okay. Then we have the. Oh, you're here. Son, hello. On now. There you go. With less than a month to prepare, Ms. Berman and staff brought their classes to the Stewart Hotel. In 2 months, they had over 100 participants in the English classes, and there's a tremendous need for this population, as one would expect. The families are going through a lot of emotional turmoil, yet Ms. Berman and staff were able to work with the families. Ms. Berman talked about what are some of the challenges, building confidence in the participants. They have a backlog of other service needs, those participants, obtaining work authorization and the need for employment. for the asylum seekers, issues of childcare for the participants while in class. There was a break in services because the funding for the classes ended. Ms. Berman and staff are waiting for more funding to be allocated so that they may resume the classes at the HERCs. Then our associate commissioner, Rung Zhang, added some background of how the classes at the HERC centers began and how they're going to continue. So last March, New York City Health and Hospitals is one of the operators of the HERC centers, was able to observe that the asylum seekers needed to learn English language in order for people to at least function and navigate the systems of the city. So H&H Health and Hospitals, new DYCD does adult literacy, and they came together to go to the Office of Management and Budget to ask for funding. And they were able to get some funding, but that funding ended in June. So now they have additional requests to continue the program, and it's being reviewed now. One of the challenges is to have appropriate and adequate space where classes can be held without ambient distractions. But most of the centers have a separate room and open space. So DYCD is currently scheduling visits to those sites to see if there is adequate space for the continuation of the English classes. So after a very lively question and answer period, meeting ended. And that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Anita, thank you very much. Now it's my pleasure to ask the chairperson, the new chairperson of this strategic partnership committee, Susan Tannebaum, to
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm going to take a page from first Vice Chair and tell everyone, first of all, good evening. Tell everyone that I was previously the recording secretary for the DYCD, and I wish Grace the best of luck in that position. And now I have the privilege of serving as chairperson of your strategic partnership committee, and my predecessor Ariel Savensky really provided a wonderful model that I'm going to aim to continue. So the Strategic Partnerships Committee met on Thursday, August 17th. The main presentation was by Luis Romero, Director of Discretionary Contract Review and Compliance at DYCD's Community Development Discretionary Program Operations. Ms. Romero gave a comprehensive and very informative presentation on something that came up earlier at tonight's meeting: accessing City Council discretionary funding, which is administered by DYCD and is a part of the Community Development Division. The presentation is in your board packet, and the meeting recording will be on DYCD's YouTube channel, or maybe it already is.
I have to look, I'm sorry.
I recommend
It will be.
presentation if you know nonprofits that are looking to apply for the council discretionary funding administered by DYCD. Some of the main takeaways were we were provided with a definition of discretionary funding. We learned that nonprofit organizations that are eligible can apply online. We went over the different types of expense funding and the vetting process, how nonprofits learn whether or not they're eligible to apply. There were some new provisions for nonprofits that have been in existence for just a few years, and during the Q&A period, Ms. Romero answered all of our questions together with Assistant Commissioner for Discretionary Programs, Valentin Lopez, and they were both very forthcoming with more information. The other issues that we covered at the meeting were NAB membership and recruitment update. Susan Patterson, director of the NAB CAB liaison unit, made this presentation. She told us there are 265 seats filled, on the NAB, and 195 of those are DYCD seats. 70 of them are recommended by elected officials. The NAB CAB liaison unit team is continuing to recruit. However, we have over 70 pending applications that need to be recommended by elected officials, and we heard about this earlier. As for the community needs assessment, the data analysis is underway, and Anita is hopeful that Anita gave this report. She's hopeful we will have a report to the CAB by the November cabin full meeting. The meeting adjourned at 5:41 p.m. and that is the second.
Thank you so much. I will now ask Anita to be so kind and do the farewell presentation of certificates to the incredible CA members who gave so much of their time to assist us. And while the certificates are really just a small token of appreciation of everything they did, it's a reminder to them their accomplishments, and they should be proud of what they accomplished throughout the year. So, Anita.
Yeah, let me put this here too. Because we'd like them to be able to. Okay, we have 4 members whose term of office is ending September 30th. And 2 of them are here present. So the first one is Mr. Wayne King. You please come. So they can see you on the
Good evening.
This certificate is being presented. It says, the Department of Youth and Community Development hereby presents Wayne King. This certificate is in great appreciation of the many years you have graciously given to the Community Action Program. Through your work as a member of the NYC Community Action Board, Region 12, Brooklyn, NDA 3, 8, and 9, and as Vice Chairperson of Neighborhood Advisory Board, Brooklyn 9. Your efforts on behalf of those in need in our community have helped make New York City a better place for all. Presented this day, September 2023, 7th day, September 2023.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. We need to get Mr. Herschel to sign.
Okay.
I need to sign it. I forgot to tell him. Sorry. And the other person is Linda Walters, who's outside. Linda. Come over here.
We're talking about
Come this
healthcare.
way. Come. So you get in the camera and people can see you from the other side. So, since your term has ended. So your term is ended, the end of this month, but we wanted to give you this certificate. It says, Department of Youth and Community Development hereby present this certificate in great appreciation of the many years you have given to the community action programs. Through your work as first vice chairperson of the New York City Community Action Board, representative of Region 19, Staten Island, NDA number 1, and member of the Neighborhood Advisory Board of Staten Island number 1. Presented this 7th day of September, 2023.
Thank you, thank you. The only thing I want to say is that it's been an honor. I've learned from all of you all. Anita is amazing, amazing. So is Mike and giving the emotion. Mr. I'm gonna call him Mr. Hambrick. Amazing, all of you all, you know, that I have worked with. And I just want to say again, thank you. And I also want to apologize if I've always harassed you all. And I kept talking about the people in my community. But
Don't stop.
yes, but I meant, you know, everything I would say because I really, really care about the community. But thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay, the other 2 members who are not present tonight are Derek Tate. He was the regional representative for Manhattan NDA 10 and 11. And he was also the chairperson of Neighborhood Advisory Board, Manhattan 11. And the other one is Miss Victoria Camarada Curto. And she was representative for Region 14, Brooklyn, NDA 11, 13, and 15, member of Neighborhood Advisory Board, Brooklyn 11. So those are the other 2 people. So thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Moving on, old business. I can't emphasize enough the importance for, as you realize, we cannot vote and accept some very important motions and resolution. I urge all of you who graced us with your presence tonight to be so kind and attend the next meeting, November 16th, and tell your colleagues on the board to please do their utmost to be here as well. New business in your packet. There was the papers of the local law 33 whistleblower protection. The next CAB meeting in fall is Thursday, November 16th. And before I adjourn, I want to thank you all again for attending tonight. Susie and the rest of us who have here coming up shortly.
Happy
We
New
wish
Year.
you a happy and healthy and wonderful Jewish New Year.
Okay.
And to my colleagues from the other faith and religions, the blessing goes to all of you as well. So
Thank you.
very happy and healthy New Year. Well, have a great evening, and thank you all for attending tonight. We're adjourning the meeting now at 7:59 p.m. Thank you.
No.